Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today let's try out a couple more of the new Dalula Company colors. Let's do Mintberry and Rich Razzin. I'm going to do these on kitchen towels, and the kitchen towels are 100% cotton, and they're a 28-inch square. I'm going to start with the Mintberry towel. I'm going to do a mandala type fold on this towel, and I'm going to begin by folding the towel in half. Then I'm going to fold the towel in half going the other direction, basically folding the towel into quarters. I'm going to grab one of the corners of the towel, fold it down, flip the towel over and do the same thing. From here, I'm going to begin like I'm folding a paper airplane. I'm going to pinch the seam that I just formed, lift the towel up off the table, and when I do, it's going to fold that other side down. At this point, I have an 8-point mandala, but because this is a towel and it's pretty thin, I'm going to fold each side back one more time, making a 16-point mandala. From here, I'm going to tie some lines in my mandala using sinew. And sinew is wax coated, so wherever I put one of these lines and tie it really tightly, I'm going to have a definition line right there. So I'm going to start by just wrapping the sinew straight across right at the very end, and that's going to kind of make a circle in the center. I'm going to pinch the fabric just a little bit below where I tied the center of my mandala. Pinch that fabric and fold it up. Then I'm going to use my sinew to tie that area that I just folded. I'm going to repeat that process, but I'm going to repeat it going the opposite direction. And I'm going to tie those folds with some sinew too. I'm going to continue alternating, folding the fabric to one side and tying it, then folding it to the opposite side and tying it, until I have the entire mandala folded and tied. Now, spoiler alert, my mandala is not going to be super clean and the lines are not going to be perfect. And I can tell you why that happened. When I was folding the mandalas I used in this video, it was really cold outside. So instead of pulling out my Panda spin dryer, I went ahead and just soaked the towels in my soda ash solution, and I wrung them out by hand. And when I do that, I can get them wrung out fairly well, but as I was tying this, soda ash solution kept getting squished or pushed out of the fabric. So it was a little too damp to get nice, pretty, perfect folds and lines. There is a fine line in there. If your fabric is too dry, I don't think it holds the folds very well. But if it's too wet, I don't think it does very well either. So I really like them just barely damp when I tie most of my ties. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up because I think you kind of get the gist of what I was doing with the tying. And after I had this mandala totally tied, I placed it aside for a couple of days just to see if I could get it to dry out a little bit. I have always said if an item is not totally dry that's as thick as a mandala, you get white streaks in the middle of it. And I don't want that in this one, so I'm going to set it aside and allow it to dry out. If you'd like a little bit more information about this topic, I have a link down below this video to my website, and I have a blog post out on my website discussing why I like to dye certain thick ties like mandalas when they're completely dry. Here's my Mintberry color swatch. And then for my setup, I'm going to use a plastic container, which I purchased from the Dollar Tree dollar store. I think they call these dish pans. And I'm going to use a thin colander, which is expandable. I purchased this one from the TikTok shop back probably about a year or so ago. I'm going to place the colander over the container, and then I'm going to place the towel down inside of the colander. For this towel, I'm going to apply the dye over the top of the ice, and you may hear that referred to as DOI. So I'm going to begin by adding quite a bit of ice to the top of the towel. And that's one of the great things about using a colander to do a design like this is it allows the ice to melt and the muck to run through the towel and down into the container below. You can muck dye this towel if you want to, which is basically just taking the towel out of the colander and putting it down inside of the container. And if you're wondering what muck is, it is the runoff from the melting ice that's mixed with the dye. But whenever you muck dye something, it gives it a darker feel. Not a lot darker, but it does. For me, it normally makes some darker lines on the back of the item, and it just kind of gives a darker feel to it. Since this is a color that I'm using on a design for the first time, I want to see how it's really going to work and what the color really is like. So I don't want to darken it any by processing it down in the muck. So what I'm doing is considered rack dyeing, even though I don't have it on like a metal rack. It is up out of the muck, so it's considered a rack dye. Now I'm going to sprinkle the Mintberry over the top of the ice, and then I'm going to add a little bit of additional dry soda ash on top. The dry soda ash is just kind of an insurance policy to make sure that with all the ice that I've added to the top of this towel, I don't rinse out the original soda ash that was in the towel from the soda ash soak. The fiber reactive dye that I'm using needs the soda ash to raise the pH and properly bond the dye to the fabric. Now I'm going to place this container aside and allow the ice to melt. And after the ice melted, I took this colander and placed it down inside of a plastic tote that had a metal rack in the bottom. I placed the lid on the tote and put it in a warm area to allow the towel to process. Okay, so let's work on Rich Razzin. For this one, I'm going to tie it into a mandala fold as well. So I'm starting by folding the towel in half. Then I'm going to fold the towel in half going the other direction. From here, I'm basically going to fold this towel in the same way that I did the Mintberry one. I am going to tie it just a little bit differently though, so I'll be back for that part. By the way, if you ever want to speed up or slow down a video, maybe you want to see something a little bit better, there's a settings icon on YouTube. If you click that settings icon, you can choose your playback speed. You can either speed it up, slow it down, to make it whatever speed is more comfortable for you. Okay, so I'm at a 16-point mandala, and I'm going to take my sinew and tie a small area right down at the very end. That's going to be the center of the mandala, and I'm going to tie it just in a straight line, so it's going to be a circle at the end. Then from here, instead of folding the fabric, I'm going to take my sinew and wrap a line of sinew at an angle. And I'm going to alternate which angle on the fold I'm going to tie the sinew. So I'm going to kind of angle it to the right, tie that. Then for the next tie, I'm going to angle it to the left and continue alternating back and forth. That very small piece of sinew at the end is bugging me. It keeps getting caught in all my stuff, so I am going to cut it off here in just a couple minutes. Okay, I think you get the hang of what I'm doing, so I'm going to go ahead and speed the video up. And if you notice, this towel is actually damper than the last one was. The last one was pretty damp, but it wasn't as bad as this one. As I'm tying this one, I'm actually squishing out quite a bit of soda ash solution. And you'll notice at one point, I picked the towel up off of the table and use a sponge to soak up the excess soda ash which has come out of the towel. If I knew this towel was as damp as it was, I would not have done this design with it. I was too far in though when I realized how much soda ash solution was coming out of it. The dampness of these towels was definitely a learning lesson for me. So for this towel, I put it aside for about 3 days to try to allow it to dry out because it's really damp. I'm actually wringing out soda ash solution when I'm twisting it. Okay, so here's my Rich Razzin color swatch that I made. I'm going to use the same setup to dye this towel, but because it is a strange shape, I'm going to have a lot of excess space left in my colander. So I'm going to use a couple of plastic containers that are empty to take up some of that space so that I don't have to fill all of that with ice. I use these plastic containers during the summertime to make ice to use on gravity dyes. Since it's the winter, I just have them stored on the shelf and they're great for filling in excess space like in this colander. So one thing I noticed about this towel is it was so damp when I tied it and so much soda ash solution came out. There is actually some crystallizing of soda ash solution on the outside of this towel. So I'm going to apply the dye to this one the same way that I did to the last one. I'm going to apply ice over the top of the towel and then sprinkle the dye over the top of that. And like I said, I'm using Rich Razzin from Dalula Company. I'm also going to add a little bit of additional dry soda ash over the top and then place the colander aside to allow the ice to melt. I placed this colander down inside of the same plastic container or plastic tote along with the other colander once all the ice melted. I left both of these towels alone for about 48 hours to allow them to process. I rinsed out my towels the same way. I took them to my utility sink and I started rinsing them in cold water to rinse out the soda ash. I actually went ahead and just washed and cleaned my colanders at the same time. So that runoff water was part of the water I was using to rinse the towels with. I then warmed the water up to hot, untied the towel, and continued rinsing in hot water to rinse out the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. Instead of rinsing for a long time, I ran myself a sink full of really hot water, placed the towel down inside, along with a little bit of Blue Dawn dish soap. Then I just allowed the towel to soak. When the water cooled off, I changed it out and I continued that soaking process until my water was remaining almost clear. And when you're doing something like this, if you have multiple towels, you can actually put them into the same pot of water to go ahead and soak them. As long as you have the Blue Dawn dish soap in the water, the colors are not going to rebond onto the opposite towel. So in this case, my Rich Razzin wouldn't bond on with the Mintberry and vice versa. Then once the water was remaining almost clear, I placed both of the towels down into my washing machine and I washed them on a hot water cycle, and I used a little bit of Dharma's Professional Textile Detergent. Okay, so the towels have been washed, dried, and ironed, and let's see what they ended up looking like. Okay, so this is the Mintberry towel, and I think this color is really a cool one. It's got that blue and the green and the kind of orangey red hints of yellow. Let me read what the Dalula Company website says about this color. It says, Mintberry is an exciting and unexpected dye combination. Colors can range from a lovely red base, refreshing yellow hues, warm sugar browns, a lively mint green, bright blues, and soft pinks with some fuchsia shades, all rounded off with a unique gray. This blend offers a delightful opportunity to experiment and discover how the colors interact across different projects. And I think that's a great description for this color. The colors are just so bright and so vibrant, and it's a color that brings a smile to my face when I look at it. It just looks like a happy color. Now, as far as my mandala goes, you see what I mean. It's just not the most defined and prettiest mandala I've ever made. But the purpose of this was to try the color and to see the color splits. So don't judge my mandala. I already told you it was going to be ugly. But do look at the color because I think it's really pretty. Okay, so now this one is the Rich Razzin, and I think this is a really cool color too. Let me read what the website says about this color. It says, Rich Razzin is a vibrant color that brings a playful touch to any project. It showcases striking browns, stunning oranges and yellows, complemented by bright light blue and energetic purples, along with soft lavenders and subtle hints of gray. Although its appearance may vary from one project to another, it always retains its signature razz. I think that's a really fun description for this color. And I think the color is really pretty. I did get a lot of the mint green, the light blues, the purple, kind of the mauve shades, definitely quite a bit of the brown. And I think it's really pretty. It's got some really cool color splits. Again, as far as my design goes, is not a good one. But this is a good teaching lesson because you know how I always say, let your projects dry out completely before you apply the dye, especially with something like a mandala. I think this is a great one to show you how you end up with the white streaks in the middle if your project is still too damp in the middle. Even though I let this one dry out for 3 days, I mean, the weather was cold, so it was dry. You think it would dry out in the middle faster, but it didn't. And it was obviously still too damp in the middle. I mean, it was really, really wet when I was tying it. So it's my own fault. I knew, but I just was trying to rush the process, which you can't do. So this one's kind of a fail too, but not the color because I think the color looks really cool. And even though I did fold the mandalas the same way, the Mintberry mandala I folded starting at that center corner. The Rich Razzin I folded starting at the outside edges. So if you'll notice, my mandala is actually like on the outer edges. So the center is right on the seam of the towel. I forgot to mention that when I was narrating the folding part. Okay, so here's both of the towels together, and you can see where my mandala starts in the middle on the Mintberry and at the edges with the Rich Razzin. But as far as the colors go, I love these colors. I think they're really cool. I think the Mintberry will be really cool for the spring and the summer to pair that with some maybe bright yellows, some oranges. That's a really fun color. The Rich Razzin, I think, is just all the color splits in that with the purples and the blues. I think that's a really pretty color too. And maybe you're not familiar with Dalula Company, or maybe you've never heard of Dalula Company, but Dalula Company is a small dye company owned by Amanda. It's located out in California, and she mixes all of these dyes specifically for ice dyeing. So she mixes them to get these cool color splits, and she has quite a few colors out on her website. But because she is a small business and mixes all the dyes by hand by herself, whenever you order a dye and between the time you order it and the time the dye is shipped, it can sometimes be up to 3 weeks. It just depends on how busy she is and how many orders she has. So I think it's worth the wait myself because these are very unique and cool colors. And I've left a link down below this video in the description to her website if you want to go check it out. She has some photos out there. She also, has the cool descriptions for each dye color. And then you can also find her out on Facebook in a Facebook group called Dalula Dyes and Company. Lots of people put projects that they've made using her dyes. And I think it's fun to see how the dyes react so differently based upon your technique, the colors that you pair it with. I just enjoy looking at what other people have done out on that Facebook group. I also have most of her dyes that I have made shirts or towels or stuff with out on my YouTube page. So if you're curious about one of the dyes and you want to see what my item looked like or how I used it, I have almost all of them out on my YouTube page. And if you've enjoyed this video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.